be blasted. The guy's a hypocrite.
You know, my jaw dropped. Two effing grifters. So,
For months or even years, the same question has been haunting Meghan and Harry. If the Invictus Games spent more than $63 million, where exactly did all that money go? And then, the day finally came when it all came to light. The documents came out.
Prince Harry's ongoing descent into total madness has continued overnight.
But what we found there seems a bit strange. We're talking blacked out pages, missing details, and sections withheld under personal data and commercial sensitivity exemptions, which basically means the information exists, but the public isn't being shown the full picture. And that immediately raises the question, what exactly is so sensitive about Invictus funding that it needs this level of redaction?
Why would there be so many redactions? Why would anything need to be honestly redacted? This is a charity form. Look at that whole page redacted around the budget. Like, excuse me? How does he allowed to get away with this? But look at this budget commercial blocked out.
Even though many info was heavily redacted from scattered pieces, we can still piece together the truth. When the final financial report was released, many people expected to see clear evidence that most of the money had gone directly toward helping veterans. Instead, they discovered something very different.
But is it really a charity project at all? Is it just being used as a money-making scheme? Dodgy involvement from the disgraceful Duke.
Let's briefly start with what has already been discussed on my channel, because it's important to remember, and then we'll move on to other interesting details that have only just now come to light. According to the official financial report for the 2025 Invictus Games in Vancouver and Whistler, the event operated on a total budget of approximately 63.2 million Canadian dollars.
When they said Invictus is a scam, the veterans are being used for PR, privately funded faux trips with lavish accommodations and Meghan's merchandising schemes. That's not how charities work.
Critics have also compared Invictus with other military sporting competitions around the world. While every event operates under different conditions, some observers point to programs such as the Warrior Games in the United States, which reportedly function on a far smaller budget. Those comparisons have fueled debate about whether the overall cost structure of Invictus has grown beyond what many supporters originally expected from a veteran-focused initiative.
and Harry and Meghan got a really nice vacation out of it with lots of adorational speeches and clapping and crowds gathered for them. So it was really odd, but I do think that people are starting to cotton on.
Of that amount, around $30 million came from taxpayers. Another $28.4 million came from sponsors, corporate partners, and donors. The remaining revenue came from ticket sales, merchandise, and other event-related income.
We, here in the United Kingdom, have committed £26 million. I mean, we are broke. We're broke. And what? He's got £4 million worth of sponsors. I mean, Paula, what else is he doing? Like, seriously, Harry, this is your full-time gig and you're asking the taxpayers for 26 mil and you've only been able to come up with 4 mil. It's a disaster. And this is a guy who claims that he's all about philanthropy and all about humanitarian causes. Well, he's not, because actually that's what you need to do. You need to drum up the money to do good works.
But here's where the controversy begins. When observers looked at the expense breakdown, they found that approximately $57.7 million went toward event operations. That's almost the entire $63 million. That category included accommodations, catering, workforce expenses, technology, broadcasting, ceremonies, marketing, event villages, and administrative costs.
So, also, it doesn't pay for the veterans' transportation or insure them. I mean, what is this paying for?
The insurance thing is insane.
It is.
Insurance.
Lots of private jets, lots of camera crews, lots of security, a documentary, beautiful fashion, of course, from Meghan, 5-star hotels they stay in. I wonder, I mean, somebody is doing there's an audit being done on the $63 million right now. I think this is going to turn out very, very badly.
Only about $5.5 million was placed into what was described as a long-term legacy fund intended to support programs before, during, and after the Games. So was it $57 million for luxury hotels, jets, and designer outfits, and only $5 million for the veterans themselves? If veterans were the focus of the event, why did such a large percentage of the budget appear to be spent on running the spectacle itself, rather than directly funding veteran services?
This is the very reason why everyone who originally worked on and set up Invictus no longer works there. Since leaving the royal fold, the foundation has become a cash cow for Harry and Meghan, and no doubt some others who are involved. It's all bubbling to the surface.
In some cases, key financial details, like the exact value of licensing fees, are not fully disclosed in public-facing summaries or appear partially redacted in official reporting. At the same time, different parts of the structure report different figures under different categories, depending on whether costs are labeled as event delivery, charitable activity, or operational spending. That means the same spending can appear in different places depending on how it is classified. And that classification matters because it shapes how efficient the organization looks on paper.
But people are a little upset about where the money is going because right now there's been a 63% drop in actual grants to wounded warriors, despite the fact that they have more money in their bank than ever from carryover. And in Vancouver.
So even when the numbers are technically reported, the way they are split up makes direct comparison difficult for the public. And that's the core issue here. It's not necessarily about one missing number. It's about a system where the full financial flow is split across multiple entities, categories, and jurisdictions. And when that happens, the question stops being just about cost. It becomes about clarity. Because the more complex the structure becomes, the harder it is to see exactly how money moves and where it ultimately ends up.
So I think the public interest is waning. And also in this time of economic disparity, people really want to know where their money is going to. And there are lots of other places that actually support veterans, may give them prosthetics if they need, may build a wheelchair ramp at their home, which is necessary, may do things that really help people as opposed to helping Harry's ego.
On paper, the Invictus Games Foundation presents a very clean message. They claim that around 92% of spending goes towards charitable activities. At first glance, that sounds extremely strong, almost unquestionable. But the key detail is hidden in what those words actually mean. Because in this context, charitable activities doesn't automatically mean direct support for veterans, rehabilitation programs, or grants to organizations on the ground.
But the term charitable activities includes the cost of running the games themselves, not direct grants or services to veterans. And the problem is that us here in the UK, us taxpayer fools, are committing funds to this. I can't believe this.
It includes something much broader. It includes the cost of running the Invictus Games themselves. The production, the ceremonies, the logistics, the events, the infrastructure, the staging of the competition. In other words, a large portion of that 92% can be tied to everything. This is just wordplay suggesting that this is money for veterans.
But the problem is, Paula, he is going to cling onto this for dear life.
So while the percentage sounds like it shows overwhelming efficiency, it doesn't tell you how much money is actually reaching veteran organizations directly. And that distinction matters, because a headline figure like 92% can look like transparency, while still leaving out the real breakdown people actually want to see.
I don't think a lot of veterans actually are devastated. The reality is, if you go deeper into Invictus, a lot of veterans are actually more upset, asking where all the money actually goes to.
And this is where the documents start to get even more questionable, because once we move past the headline numbers, almost everything else starts to disappear behind redactions. Whole sections of budgets, cost breakdowns, and internal planning documents are blacked out under exemptions, meaning personal data and commercial sensitivity.
There is something not sitting right with this charity. Charities that have something to hide should not be trusted, especially with so much NGO fraud being exposed in the last few years.
That looks confusing. You get a document that confirms spending exists without actually showing how it's spent. And that's where the frustration starts to build. Instead of clarity, you're left with fragments. The issue here doesn't start with whether money is missing. It starts with how the money moves.
That was never my understanding of what the Invictus Games was about. You know, if that's the case, why is Harry not competing himself? Because trust me, he's mentally scarred for a whole load of reasons, you know?
On paper, the Invictus Games are working with a budget of around $63 million. A significant portion of the funding comes from public sources, $30 million in taxpayer money. That sounds massive, almost unstoppable. But the key detail is that this money doesn't flow in a straight line to veterans.
Crucially, that public money didn't flow directly to the games. It was routed through the Vancouver Whistler Games Corporation, which then paid a licensing fee to the Invictus Games Foundation, the British charity that owns and licenses the games brand. The amount of that licensing fee was oddly redacted. I sense a cover-up.
It moves through layers first, organizing bodies, delivery teams, event infrastructure, logistics, production, security, branding. And that's where things start to feel off, because when people hear veteran-focused event, they assume most of that money is going directly to veterans. But the figures being discussed tell a different story.
They seem to be in the pocket of the Sussex public relations machine, which is ruthless and relentless and never sleeps.
Direct grants to veteran organizations are reported at around £200,000, which is tiny compared to the overall scale of tens of millions being spent. So instead of a clean donation to veterans path, you end up with a multi-layer structure where money is constantly moving between organizers, events, and foundation accounts.
But Invictus funds were directed towards private jets, five-star hotels, and transportation for Harry and Meghan.
Prince Harry remains at the center of the story simply because his name is tied to the brand, the funding narrative, and the public expectations. And once that happens, the conversation stops being just about accounting. It becomes about trust, structure, and what the numbers actually represent behind the scenes.
And this is the same Prince Harry who was previously running and is now on the board of a charity called African Parks, which has been accused of the worst abuses of tribes in Africa. Now, that's not Harry doing that. The stuff is being alleged within that charity on his watch. Then you've got Invictus, which is losing sponsors, including Boeing, on his watch.
Also, documents shows that a new senior executive role has been added, reportedly on a six-figure salary. Cash reserves have also grown, reaching around $2.3 million. So money is increasingly being held inside the organization rather than distributed outward.
Chaotic and bad stuff is happening on his watch. And in the corporate world, normally that's when you fall, you know, that the boss has to step down when bad stuff happens. But not Harry, of course. He's far too important for that.
And it doesn't stop there. Legal fees have risen significantly, climbing from tens of thousands into the $150,000 range, with no detailed public explanation for the increase.
Somehow this balloons from an event that cost $1 million the first year they did it to $63 million now. Harry has ballooned the budget from $1 million. It cost $1 million to do it with 400 people. It's now $63 million with an extra 140 people. What the
Individually, each of these changes could be explained, but taken together, they point in the same direction. More income, less direct distribution, higher internal costs, larger reserves, more financial complexity. And that's where the key question comes in. When a charity is taking in more money than ever, but cutting direct support to the people it claims to serve.
Legal fees jumped from £45,000 to £155,000 with no explanation given. Deferred income ballooned fourfold from £431,000 to £1.799 million. An American for-profit company called June's LLC, with no description of purpose, received nearly £30,000 in 2023 and nothing in 2024. And the same filing contains two different company registration numbers, one on the cover page, another on the balance sheet.
Before diving deeper, it's important to remember that last month a major spotlight landed on Prince Harry after Time magazine placed him at the very top of its Time 100 Sports Leaders list.
Time magazine, which is an iconic magazine, has made a massive mistake. They fed the monster of Harry's ego and named him in their inaugural Time 100 sports list, placing him, wait for it folks, at the top of the leaders category. What were they thinking?
Not just included, not just featured, ranked as #1 in the leaders category.
So he's #1 on the most influential figure in sport 2026 with some kind of imaginary leadership role. I mean, this is a guy that couldn't lead a Boy Scout group, could he? I wouldn't trust him to lead a dog. He couldn't lead a horse to water, let alone.
The magazine framed him as a global force in sport, crediting his work with the Invictus Games and positioning him above some of the biggest names in modern athletics: LeBron James, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and 96 others.
Quite clearly, Time magazine have been infected with the MMV, the Meghan mind virus.
On paper, it was a major win, but at what cost? At the exact same time, a very different story was circulating in the background, one involving an Invictus Games participant, a seriously injured military veteran, and allegations that after a life-changing injury during competition, he was left without meaningful follow-up support.
Prince Harry seemed to have left Scott Snow behind. Competed in 2023 Invictus in Dusseldorf. He was injured. He was in a wheelchair that did not have restraint straps. So basically defective hardware. It drives me crazy. I mean, Prince Harry founded these games. He's the public face of Invictus. And has anyone from his office bothered to reach out to you? Has anyone bothered to, from Invictus, after that initial meeting, bothered to reach out and say, hey, let's help out here?
I never heard from anybody, to be honest with you.
The contrast is what makes this moment stand out. Harry presents himself as a biggest veteran supporter, the founder of this charity project. But in reality, he didn't even check on this injured veteran.
Harry, we are told, has been deafening in his silence whilst this guy is seriously ill.
By the time he competed in Invictus, he had already undergone extensive medical treatment, reportedly more than a dozen surgeries, and was also dealing with PTSD and long-term service-related injuries. Despite this, he chose to participate in the games, describing it as a personal milestone and a way to represent his military identity in front of his family. Little did he know where this could lead.
Special Forces veteran, whom Invictus chose to feature in its official Team Canada promotional video. So this guy's a big deal, right? He really, really matters. Scott Snow, a brave hero, somebody that's obviously had awful trauma as a result of war, because if you don't know, Invictus is a brilliant idea on paper. It's veterans, people that have fought in war or in a military context, and they've either got physical or mental injuries or both. And it's an amazing thing because what Invictus does, it gives them focus.
And that gap between global recognition and individual experience is where this story begins.
Maybe Harry should call Scott Snow on the occasion of this great Time magazine honor.
The project has been widely praised for its concept, using sport as rehabilitation, identity building, and psychological recovery for service members dealing with both physical and mental trauma. Is all of that true? Looking at all the documents, details, numbers, money spendings, this event looks like a PR for Harry and especially Meghan, not a space that restores identity, confidence, and purpose for veterans who may have lost those things after service.
What really bothered me was this is all a PR play.
It is such an honor to be here tonight, celebrating all of you and supporting my husband in the Invictus Games, which he founded.
So the question is simple. Is this really a charity for veterans? Or has Invictus become something else entirely? What do you think? Share your thoughts with me.
Like, the audiences were basically shipped in to sit around Harry and Meghan to make it look as if it was a popular event, whereas actually there were just a handful of people watching most of the games.
Many began calculating the cost per competitor. The Vancouver Whistler Games featured just over 500 competitors representing 23 nations. Using the overall budget, some observers estimated that the event cost well over 100,000 Canadian dollars per participant. Yes, per one participant.
He went to Germany, competed, and here's what happened, folks. He was horrifically injured. And then the organization that used his story to sell the games stopped returning his messages.
But veterans themselves say they were responsible for covering many of their own costs. That means that they certainly didn't receive $100,000 each. So where did all that money actually go?
200,000 pounds go toward the vets. 200,000 pounds out of 63 million.
Also, direct grants to veteran organizations appear significantly smaller than the overall budget would suggest. Earlier accounts referenced grant totals of around 530,000 pounds, while later figures dropped closer to 200,000 pounds, a reduction of roughly 63%.
Yes, well, you also know how he feels about it because during the court case with the Daily Mail, his past notes to a Daily Mail reporter were made public, and he was mocking and saying how much he hated going out and pressing the flesh, when frankly, buddy, that's what you're there for. He seems to think I'm doing the job I was born to do, but I don't know if he understands that job. And raising money is huge. And the job is not just showing up, having people take your photos and shake some hands.
This contrast between total event spending and direct support to veterans is one of the key points driving scrutiny. The central question emerging from all of this is simple but uncomfortable. When tens of millions are flowing into a charity-branded global event, why do the direct figures reaching veterans appear so small in comparison? And what exactly sits inside the gaps between those numbers?
Basically, the British taxpayers are footing the bill because no corporates in the United Kingdom want to be involved with Prince Harry, as Dr. Sophie Chandoka of Centre Bali had previously made clear to him.
And another issue here, the origins of Invictus itself.
The Games were born more than a decade ago from a promise that I made to myself. A promise to uphold my obligation, a sacred obligation after my own decade and privilege of military service, to do whatever I could to help my fellow brothers and sisters heal, and to champion everything that we stand for.
While Prince Harry is widely recognized as the public founder and driving force behind the project, some analysts argue that the early development of the Games also benefited from broader institutional support, including assistance from royal foundations and established networks.
Don't you give him credit for the Invictus Games. The royal family started it with money William got from a lawsuit that William won. He donated money to start the Invictus Games. That's what people said in the comments. I don't know. Don't get mad at me if I'm wrong about that. And then they turned it over to Harry to give him something to do.
That perspective does not necessarily diminish Harry's role, but it adds another layer to the conversation about ownership, responsibility, and public expectations.
Here's Harry quoted in this embarrassing article in Time.
I thought, wow, look at the power of sport. Look at how it's literally changing lives in front of my very eyes.
He goes on to say,
it was so clear to me, let's invite as many countries as possible to make it international, because clearly more countries need to benefit from this.
There is also growing discussion about sponsorship trends. Earlier editions of the Games benefited from strong backing from major corporations and a broad network of partners. Critics argue that any reduction in private sector support could increase dependence on government funding, while supporters counter that public investment reflects the social value of the event.
Boeing was the huge sponsor. The contract has ended and they are not re-signing. So Harry has to go to Birmingham this summer. He has to drum up some sort of business because at this point, A, it's just embarrassing. And B, yes, government funds are supposed to cover about half, but the other half are supposed to come from private companies and private individuals, and nobody's dropping a dime anymore.
Either way, the balance between sponsorship and taxpayer contributions is likely to remain a key issue in future financial discussions. As you start connecting all the pieces, one issue keeps coming up again and again: transparency.
Prince Harry's Invictus Game, you follow the royal family very, very closely. What's the latest there?
He's having a lot of issues.
Meghan's role is different, but still important in how the story is perceived. She is not an operational figure in the Games, but she appears in the wider narrative ecosystem around Harry. Public appearances, media, coverage, and global attention. That visibility increases the scale of scrutiny.
She was absolutely loving all of the attention, but the problem is no one wanted her there.
Yeah, no one wanted her there. Reports were coming out even before the Games that they did not want her there because usually the attention is taken away from, the veterans.
When she attends events or is seen connected to Invictus moments, it amplifies both support and criticism at the same time, because suddenly the project is no longer viewed purely as a veteran initiative, but also as part of a global celebrity and royal adjacent brand.
I am truly so grateful to be a part of this with each and every one of you. I've witnessed the most amazing support networks that surround competitors, and I've had the privilege.
And this is where the tension comes in. Supporters see their involvement as positive. It brings attention, fundraising power, and global reach to veterans who might otherwise be ignored. Critics see something else. A situation where a humanitarian project becomes heavily tied to high-profile personalities, meaning the focus slowly shifts from beneficiaries to the people representing the brand.
And out of these Invictus Games because she's turned them into a laughingstock internationally.
A lot of people did not want her to be there.
The next Invictus Games are already locked in for Birmingham 2027. And this is where the financial pressure becomes even more visible. The UK government has reportedly committed up to £26 million in public funding for the event. That's taxpayer money.
This is basically a PR play for Harry because he's about to go to Birmingham right now, drum up some business, because right now he only has $4 million in unnamed corporate sponsors for the 2027 games. And he needs a lot more. He needs about at least 25 million more to match the government's 29 million pounds.
A large-scale public contribution to a charity-branded international sporting event. Some commentators have even questioned whether Invictus has evolved into a global brand that could continue operating regardless of who serves as its public face.
Said that the $4 million in sponsorships, that the sponsors, the corporate donors, aren't named. So I'm wondering, because people will rag on the corporate sponsors? Do they have people giving them money who say, don't use my name? Is that possible?
Supporters reject that idea and maintain that Harry remains essential to the games' identity and emotional connection with participants. Critics, however, see the organization as increasingly independent, driven by sponsors, governments, volunteers, and international committees. The answer likely depends on how future editions of the games are received by both veterans and the public.
The public's taxes footed a portion of the bill. According to tax returns on file, the public picked up half the tab for Vancouver.
But the context around Birmingham makes the situation more complicated. The city itself has recently faced severe financial instability and even declared bankruptcy in 2023 before later exiting that status in early 2025. So the idea of committing tens of millions in public funds to a high-cost international event is already raising questions. On top of that, sponsorship is reportedly limited. Only around 11 confirmed sponsors and estimated combined value around £4 million. For comparison, earlier Invictus editions like Vancouver reportedly had major corporate backing, including large global companies and dozens of partners. So the structure now looks different. Government money covers a significant portion, corporate funding appears weaker, private sponsorship is thinner than before. So who is actually paying for it and why?